Back for episode 2 of the podcast.
Yeah, episode 2.
Technically, because we had filmed an episode after the Alan Watts one, but the video cut out halfway through, and
Yeah.
I decided for right now not to do anything with it.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's perfectly fine to me.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a good podcast, but we can always come back and revisit that topic. So
That's what I was thinking. Do it right.
yeah, exactly. It's better to do something whole-assed than to half-ass something and
Yeah.
just get it out there because we did it, so might as
Right.
well use it. So yeah, I'm okay with that. You didn't tell me that before the podcast, but but we are here now to talk about a man called David Goggins
Mm-hmm.
and his book Can't Hurt Me.
Mm-hmm.
And just to list off a few things that he's done, I'll read his biography off of Wikipedia because it's pretty solid. So David Goggins,
It's an impressive resume.
for sure, just based off of Wikipedia, and you know how those are. That's just a fraction of who he is. But yeah, David Goggins, born February 17th, 1975, is an American ultra marathon runner, ultra distance cyclist, and triathlete, motivational speaker, and author. He is a retired United States Navy SEAL and former United States Air Force Tactical Air Control Party member who served in the Iraq War. He is the former world record holder for the most pull-ups done in 24 hours. I looked this one up because it's not on the biography. It's 4,030 pull-ups in 24 hours, and that has since been broken. But he did.
Oh, it has since been broken?
has
I
since been
I didn't know that. That must have been recent because they don't mention that in the book.
It doesn't. It was actually by, I think it's by Marcus Luttrell, who he talks about in the book, who is the brother of the lone survivor.
Oh, okay.
It's either Marcus Luttrell or Morgan Luttrell,
Uh-huh.
I think, who now has the current record. I didn't look that up. But yeah, so he did 4,030 pull-ups in 24 hours to break the record. And that was on
Wow.
his third attempt. He had done it 2 times prior and failed.
And it turns out third time is the charm reigns true for a couple events in his life.
Yeah, right? Yeah. It's not, yeah, it's interesting. And then lastly, his self-help memoir, Can't Hurt Me, which was released in 2018 and is going to be the main topic of discussion.
Right, that's what we're here to talk about.
For
And
today.
it was released, you said in 2018, and it was released physically, so you can buy it in bookstores. Also, which is how we consumed it, was the Audible audiobook.
Yes.
hmm
And I prefer it that way.
It has extra content, I believe, that way,
Yeah.
because it's done sort of, and they mentioned this, sort of a hybrid between just a straight audiobook, just
Yeah.
to read through,
Mhm.
and sort of a podcast.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because it has David Goggins and the man who wrote it with him, who I believe his name was Adam.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Adam is the one actually reading it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And David Goggins is there for well-earned interjections
Yes.
to add to the content.
Absolutely. Kind of dives deeper into the stories told in the book
Mhm.
to give a little further context, which just adds to the insanity. that
And
he's kind of lived
essentially,
through.
right. And essentially, it is about what he lived through. It's about what he lived through. It's an account of his life. It's his story.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it covers a lot of things you read off his Wikipedia page, off his biography there.
Yeah.
Um, But it covers it in very in-depth detail. And David Goggins makes it clear that it is his story, but it's not about him.
Yeah.
And he isn't telling you any of this stuff to bring praise to himself.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is embarrassing. And he says that it was hard to get out,
Yeah.
the stuff about his childhood
Yeah.
and his struggles. And
There's a really funny line in the book where he talks about how the book is like, it's a story about his life and not about, trying to impress people, but just trying to tell people. And he's like, yeah, I mean, I told all these stories about my childhood, so on and so forth. And then Adam immediately interjects, wetting the bed. David Goggins is like,
Yeah.
thank you, Adam, for not letting me forget that.
Right.
So he doesn't hold anything back in the story, which makes it very real and kind of cuts away any excuse as the reader, I felt, to say, well, he's different than me.
right,
Because
right.
his story, or at least his childhood, was
Mhm.
far, far worse than anything I could have imagined.
And that's another thing he really stresses, is that it's easy to listen to a story, and once you get sort of caught up, once you get to all those crazy things that he's done,
Mhm.
you sort of forget the beginning part of it. You
Exactly.
forget where it came from, and you see those successes and those feats that he accomplished in isolation,
Mhm.
and you say, "Oh wow, he did that thing," and stop there and say he must be different.
Yeah.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you forget the beginning part of the story and to see how he got how he became to be able to accomplish those things that he did.
Yeah.
Which he wants to. He stressed that he wanted people to see the entire thing for what it is, not just see those feats in isolation.
Absolutely. And seeing it for the whole story makes it better. Makes it, like I said, more real.
Yeah.
And cuts the excuse away, because he's the feat, like running. I'm just gonna walk right into it and go into the most crazy thing I saw or read in the book, which was him in his third Hell Week running on broken legs. Like had multiple stress fractures throughout his shin bone. So I think that's the fibia or the tibia, one of the two.
They're both there.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway.
Right. And Hell Week, for those who don't know, is the training for Navy SEALs.
Yes.
Or it's at least a portion of it.
It's the cutting, it's the separating of the wheat from the chaff part in my eyes. You know, like you get a lot of people who quit leading up to Hell Week, and a lot of people who quit in Hell Week, but once you make it through Hell Week, you get the brown shirt, which is the know, elevating from the white to the brown shirt. Excuse me. And then you yeah. And a lot of people don't quit after that because they've already gone through a whole week of no sleep, you know, constant movement, and just getting hounded by some of the worst training or some of the hardest training SEALs in the American military. So it's no joke.
Right. And so David Goggins had gone through 3 of these Hell Weeks in a year. Right.
Yeah.
Which going through one of them is a task in itself.
Yes. Yeah, it's crazy.
And 3 of them, and like you were saying, in his last Hell Week, you know, it was his last attempt. That was it.
Yeah, yes.
He wasn't going to be able to roll back into it. And so it was all or nothing. You know, he had to get through or he didn't.
Yeah.
And so even with his injuries still prevalent, he found a solution within himself and made it through.
Yeah, absolutely. So like the reason he got kicked out of the second Hell Week is he had jacked up his knee. And we'll
oh God, I sneezed. Sorry.
It's all good. So I guess this is kind of the most, I think the premise of David Goggins and kind of like his main hypothesis and theory, which is the mind is capable of some amazing things.
Yes.
And he proves it in Hell Week.
Not only is it capable of those things, but it is important to push your mind to some of those
and
reaches.
To find them.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you don't push yourself to find them or put yourself in those situations, then you're never going to experience the true potential of the human mind and the human body, because the human mind is able to overpower the signals that the body sends to the mind.
Right.
Like when in his second Hell Week, when his knee was just unbelievably destroyed, like he had essentially broken his kneecap, and the instructors were making the man do bear crawls around the pool, and he said he started it out, and his knee was just, he could feel the moving parts in his knee adjusting, and with every step, and just grinding.
There were a couple parts in that book that made me cringe.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
and so
that being one of them. The getting into it later on, the heart surgery was one of them.
Oh yeah. His heart surgery. Yeah. Oh, and so, and right there, he is just able to grind his way and get through this punishment that the instructors are giving him, because I forget why they were originally punishing him for something. But yeah, so he gets through that, and then as soon as he gets through that, he does have to go to the doctor, and they check him out, and they said, yeah, your kneecap is gone. Like it's broken.
Right.
You got to get rolled back. Otherwise you're not gonna be able to walk again, pretty much. So the mind's able to take control of the body for short instances.
Yeah.
Is pretty much what David Goggins is all about. And you're able to roll those short instances and short victories into a continual burst of energy, as he kind of, like running on broken legs, like he tapped into that unlimited potential. Really, it's almost, in my eyes, it looks as if it's unlimited.
It really seems that way. And watching him on Joe Rogan's podcast, they were talking about, you know, David Goggins was saying that nobody ever really reaches 100%. He was striving for that, and Joe says, "Well, wouldn't 100% be death?" You know.
I didn't see that. No, no, no. That's really
And David Goggins was like, "Yeah, yeah, I think you're right, actually."
funny. See, but it's almost like a star though, like a supernova. Like the brightest moment is right before death.
Hmm.
So perhaps like we're supposed to be stars, where maybe we are.
Jack London believed that the function of man was to live, not to exist, and he
Yeah,
has a beautiful poem talking about that, and he uses imagery of a star.
yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, it's like why live a long life if you're not going to be challenged, you know?
Yeah, he says that he would rather be a raging star that will eventually burn out than a dormant planet that
Yeah,
will sit there forever.
exactly. And like because I think for the majority of people that's the truth. Even if they don't want to admit it, they act it out.
Hmm.
They're maybe a little bit bitter about the current situation that they're in and at their job or something like
Yeah.
that. And it's like they're saying I want just peace and subtleness and enjoyment, when in reality they're kind of killing themselves
Hmm.
by working these jobs in which they're not getting challenged and they're not working hard
Yeah.
and they're not reaching their full potential.
Yeah. And going into one of the things I got from the book, actually, that's a good segue.
Hmm.
And I don't want to dwell on just us recounting David Goggins' story,
Yeah, I don't
because
either. Yeah,
the book does a much better job of that than
for
we ever could
sure,
do.
for sure. Yeah.
And hearing the dialogue between Adam and David as they
Hmm.
talk is, it really adds. But one of the things I got from the book is, I believe it was a quote that came from the book,
Hmm.
but he pretty much, David Goggins said that he thought about this question, that what's the cost to the world of not everybody reaching their true potential?
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
what is society missed out on? What is the
Yeah,
human race missed out on? What
yeah,
is the world missed out on
yeah.
with so many people failing to reach their full potential?
And I think that's a great, great question. And
Hmm.
Jordan Peterson kind of talks about it in a different way, talking about accepting ultimate responsibility
Yeah.
and saying that life isn't necessarily about the pursuit of happiness, but rather the pursuit of responsibility. And that in responsibility and in accepting the burden of reality, you find happiness and you find peace. And I feel like David Goggins kind of found that in the
Hmm.
end, realizing that everything he had done up to this point was struggle and pain and suffering. And he realized that, and then he found immense peace in
Yeah.
realizing that he was able to handle that. Not only handle it, but transcend it to become such an inspiration for
Hmm.
millions. And so it's like it's it's crazy to that different people come to the same realization and they talk about it in different ways.
Yeah.
David Goggins, this knuckle dragger, hardcore, just nose to the grinder mentality, and then Jordan Peterson, this well-renowned social psychologist,
Hmm.
coming to the same realization that life may not be about the pursuit of happiness, but rather what is the pursuit of meaning,
Right.
and finding that is what brings real happiness.
And everybody is going to be you know, left responsible for their own deliberations, and people can choose whatever paths they want to do in life, whether they, don't want to be in contact with anybody and
Yeah.
just be their own person by themselves. That's fine. But I think for a lot of people, hopefully, when you realize that you do have a way to benefit those around you and to benefit your communities and your society,
Hmm.
then it's hard to look past that. When you realize, you know what I mean?
I think it is, except when you look at the nature of history, and that the collapse of civilization comes from willful ignorance, and that the pursuit of what is like hard and what is challenging and what is beneficial for society and for the individual
Mm-hmm.
is known to be good and known to be like this is the path we should take, but willful ignorance and will people saying I want to be comfortable, I
Yeah.
want to enjoy my life and not do anything to benefit others.
Have you heard of the
That's the collapse of civilization. It just repeats throughout history.
have you heard
Rome,
of the
Germany, all
right?
that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I'm sorry, I was interrupting you. Have you heard of the prisoner situation?
No, I have not.
So, essentially, there are two prisoners, uh, and they were arrested together, and they're taken in separate rooms.
Yeah.
And each prisoner is told the same thing. They're told that if neither of them talk, then they're going to get they're going to get a somewhat light prison sentence because they can't squeeze any information out of them, any evidence against them.
Yeah.
But if both of them talk, then they're both going to serve hard time because they're both giving each other up, you know?
Yeah.
If one of them talks and the other one doesn't,
Yeah.
then the one who talks is going to get off free and the other one is going to serve hard time.
Hard time, yeah.
So it's a thought experiment of what's the more likely route? Like, are each prisoners going to choose what is best for the individual in both cases, which would lead to the worst possible scenario for each person, both doing hard time?
Yeah.
Are they each going to do what's better for the group, which would be to not talk, and then they each get light time? Or is one going to pick something that's better for the individual and himself benefit, while the other one picks what's better for the group and suffer? You know?
Yeah. That would really just depend on the individual relationship between the two, between like that working relationship, because of like, I mean, they're criminals.
Yeah.
So they're probably already doing things selfishly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would imagine they would selfishly choose the option that benefits them the best or the
And
most.
both
And so
end
both
up serving hard time.
Yeah, because both would probably, one would rat out the other, trying to protect himself, because that would be his actions that got him to that position are all actions that kind of were self-thought and only working for himself. So I'd imagine he would maintain that path and would continue serving himself and not serving his friend who he was committing crime with.
Well, you're really digging into the characters of these people and their motives. But this is a question that you can present to people as like a test say that you are one of these prisoners. You're in this room. What would you do? And I could be wrong about this, but I think that most people do end up doing what's best for themselves.
Yeah.
Or what seems to be the best for themselves, because when you pick the individualistic mentality, then you have the 50-50 of, is the other person also going to choose this path, and are we both going to get screwed, or am I going to benefit from this at the cost of the other person?
I think that is just human nature, is that it usually is more self-serving than it is serving of others. Speaking for myself personally, I'm a very self-serving person. I try not to be. No, I'm not going to lie like that. No, I definitely am. Like, I do what I want to do, and it takes a lot of coercing, not a lot, but it's just like, hey, you want to go on this bike ride? Like, no, I don't want to go on this bike ride. And
it takes a lot of coercing, you're saying, to get you to do something outside of
what I want to do, and outside of, and it takes me thinking about the rest of the group and being like, all right, well, if I don't do this, I'll hurt their feelings, and I want to appease them, and I want to be like, I like them, you're my friends, like, yeah, I'll do this. Like, okay. But my initial response is, no, I'm not going to do this because I don't want to. So I'd imagine, I'm just kind of using an anecdotal evidence for myself. I would imagine a majority of humanity would be the same way, and just saying, I want to do this for myself. And I think
do you think it's beneficial to imagine the rest of humanity like that?
Probably not, because I think Epictetus says to imagine everyone else sees the world as you see it is foolish. It's foolishness, which is true, because everyone lives a different life, and everyone has a different perspective on life. That said, that's my perspective. Is that the majority of humanity is selfish, at least living in the United States. I think I look at it more from like the long-standing situation of things. Like Rome back in the day, it wasn't self-serving. It was, for the Republic, it was for the people, and it did very well. And then it starts, when Caesars and individual military leaders start thinking for themselves and saying, I have all the answers, then that's when, things start to deteriorate. And I think that tends to happen with civilizations as a whole. They start out very good, because when you're by yourself and you need a group of people to help you, you're gonna do it for the group. But after a while, you become self-sufficient, because all these advances that were made with the group are no longer the group is no longer necessary to maintain these advances.
Yeah.
You know, the home that is built can be maintained by one person.
Right.
The food that is, you know, the land that's now been cultivated and now, you know, has kind of like a pattern set to it. It's much easier to grow. It's much
efficient.
easier to more efficient. Exactly. So you can cut back on the amount of interdependence on people.
Yeah.
And that leads to people being more selfish. And
It leads to a larger stratification of class system too.
absolutely. Yeah.
The only thing I'm thinking though is that if that's your mindset, um, is that going to be a sort of is that going to be involved in a feedback loop that affects your actions? So if your mindset is most people are self-serving,
Mm-hmm.
is that going to influence the way you see other people and their actions? Like, are you going to see somebody doing something and think, oh, they're doing that for themselves? And is
Absolutely.
that going to affect how you behave with your own actions? And is it just going to further uh, propagate your own mindset,
The
support
the
your own
the
mindset?
self-serving mindset.
Yeah. Is having that mindset fuel for your self-serving actions and itself, you know?
Yeah. I don't see how it couldn't, to be honest,
Okay.
because the mindset, I mean, your mindset is everything.
Right.
And if you, this is, I think you have to be aware of the mindset that you have.
Which is something David Goggins was very good at,
Very
which we
good
can
at,
get into in a
yeah,
second.
exactly. Very good at having and being aware of where his mind was at and what he
Hmm.
was thinking, how he was thinking. Yeah, I do think that it would make me more likely to see someone and say, yeah, it's a self-serving action. Um, and I still, and like I said, though, I don't think that's a bad mentality
You
to
don't think that's a
have
bad thing to happen?
because I think the majority of human nature speaks to that.
Right. So you don't think it's a bad mentality to have because it's the mentality that you have.
I think it's the mentality of human nature,
Right.
and based off of history.
Uh-huh.
Based off of my study of history and like what I've seen from it and how over time people like they work together as a group, and then once the benefit of the group is no longer necessary, then or is no longer visible, the group begins to deteriorate unless a new purpose is given.
Make new groups.
It make new groups, or unless a new purpose is given to the original group,
Hmm.
and in which case that's able to sustain
Like in wartime
in
or something.
wartime, or with like the triads and the Chinese,
Hmm.
and how they were able to change that like freedom fighting group into more of a crime syndicate, and same with freedom fighters with the Taliban. You know, like they were fighting for their freedom of the
Yeah.
country, and now we view them as terrorists. But back in the 1980s, we were like, yeah, they're doing good stuff against the
Right.
Soviets. It one, perspective changes everything,
Uh-huh.
and two, when the benefits of the group are no longer visible, they tend to splinter
Yeah.
apart, and that speaks to the individual nature of humanity.
Hmm.
In my eyes, that when crap hits the fan, people are gonna look for their own actions.
Right. And so,
I don't want it to be that way,
uh-huh.
but I think that, and I think that's how it is. And granted, I do have a very religious background,
Yeah.
and you know, I think with that in mind, you know, it's like you look at Buddhism, you know, like life is suffering, and that suffering is caused by eternal striving
Yeah.
by the
So to get into
individual.
Alan Watts.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. And so, and then like Christianity is the same deal. You know,
Yeah.
it's one person going against the whole stream of society, and the whole stream of society is saying, well, why don't you do this for me? Do that for me. Why don't you save Israel for me?
So if you believe that that society in general as a mass is moving in the wrong direction, and society was created by humans, mankind, is that inferring that humans are, you know, in general, uh,
Mhm.
pulled towards the wrong direction? This is talking on, you know, like innate human
It is, yeah.
morality to an extent.
It is, which is fine. I mean, I think your situation, like the position in which you're in,
Yeah.
definitely plays a role. But usually, humanity is inherently bad in my eyes.
You think so?
I think the way Nietzsche puts it, I think like people aren't good because they are good people. They are good people because they are afraid of bad consequences. And I think that's the case for me.
Mm-hmm.
This is again anecdotal for me. In my eyes, I don't think I'm a good person because I genuinely think I'm a good
Yeah.
guy. I think I'm a good person because, like I said earlier, I think my friends will look at me differently. I think
Do you think
the
most
world
of
will
the
look at me
people do
differently.
you think most of the people around you would agree with that statement though?
No, but then again, I don't think majority of people know you as a true individual. Like only the individual as themselves
Mhm.
know what is going on in the mind. And so therefore all these outside factors, all these outside people don't know what's going on in the
Yeah.
inside. So they are incapable of making an accurate description of what's happening to a person on the inside,
Yeah.
unless that person is talking to them. You know, unless I'm telling you like this is what I see, this is what's going on in my mind, then
That yeah.
then the person can say, I didn't realize
That
that.
made me want to go into that conversation we had with that guy named George about language and yeah,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
but not to digress further.
Yeah, right.
That's a different podcast.
Tangents
Talking about what's going on, within your
in
own
the
mind.
mindset. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
David Goggins, another thing that I got from the book is that David Goggins clearly just on the surface, the things that has done,
yeah,
his mental and physical toughness
yeah.
sets him apart from most people.
Oh,
And
100%.
that attracts people to him. That's why he has the audience to write a book.
Yeah.
He's, successful with the following on social media.
Mhm.
Because people see these things initially and they're impressed.
Yes.
But once you dig deeper, when you listen to his story and how he, whoops,
Whoopsie-daisy.
how he sort of developed this mental and physical toughness,
Yeah.
is his ability to introspect.
Yes.
He has he is very in tune, or at least he has became very in tune with his own mental workings.
Yes.
He was able to, and I think he uses this analogy in the book, he was able to perform a dissection of his mind
Yes.
and find out what different motivations come from where, how to overcome the negative ones, how to, keep feeding the positive ones.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that is his ability to introspect is what led to the things that people are initially impressed with him by.
Yeah, and I think that is, again, that just relates back to what we as a species find attractive in a leader and in people like that. Like, I mean, like Murdoch in ancient Mesopotamia, he was this creature with like hundreds of eyes.
Yeah.
So he was the leader of this ancient Mesopotamia people. So introspection, being able to see and understand, and not only like to sustain truth in chaotic times.
So Murdoch is a mythical character?
Yeah.
You said he was covered in eyes?
Yeah, so Murdoch is this creature that, or mythical person in ancient Mesopotamia that goes out and fights Tiamat, which is the embodiment of chaos that comes out of the ocean.
And his being covered in eyes is a representation of his wisdom?
His wisdom, his vision, his ability to see.
Okay,
and so
to understand.
And to understand. And so introspection is very similar. You're taking events that are happening in the present and inspecting them and seeing, all right, where does that come
Past
from?
and present and
Past
future.
and present and future. Exactly. Like this present moment, where did it come from and where is it taking me? And how is that going to affect me as an individual? And that's what David Goggins is doing. He's looking at it at an individual purpose. He's looking at it for how is this moment right now in the present going to affect my future, and where did it come from? What past event brought me here?
Yeah.
What life have I led to bring me to this point, and what am I going to lead in the future? And what action am I going to take right now that's going to bring me to the future I want?
Yeah.
And that's exactly that's what people find attractive. They find me, I mean, maybe I shouldn't use people. Me, I find attractive the ability to distinguish what is good, and then setting a goal for it and saying I'm achieving that goal, and then achieving it. And so again, anecdotally evident for me, if I find that when I say attractive, I mean like I want to follow that person and want to lead a lifestyle similar to that person. And I think a lot of people find that.
And going off that, David Goggins, I can't remember if this is in the book or in one of Joe Rogan's podcasts, but he says that the most important conversations you will have is with yourself.
Absolutely.
In these moments of suffering that you are with just your mind, those are the times that you're going to find yourself, what motivates you, what drives you, what you really want. You're going to find the true you.
Yes.
Do you think though that because David Goggins, these uh, lifestyle choices that he has implemented in his own life have obviously produced undeniable results,
Yeah.
but also seem to be that he seems to have come from them in sort of like a revelation type thing. So, do you think that most people, if they were given the time with themselves to have this conversation with themselves, that they would come to the same conclusions that David Goggin has about his life and about life in general?
First off, yes, I do.
Okay.
Second off, I think it's been already written down in our own religious texts. I think that a lot of those texts are designed to be read in such a manner that you're able to distinguish that it's an individual basis that makes right or wrong, and it is, down. I forget who says it, but the line of morality falls between each and every man, and I think that. I'm sorry. What was the question? I zoned out a little bit. I'm sorry.
If no problem. If people
I had the time.
given
Yes.
the introspection would come to the same conclusions
Yeah.
that David Goggins or a person like him has.
Yes. I would. Yeah. I do think, given the time, that they would be able to do that, and that religious texts are designed to be read in such a manner to lead you down that road for yourself, because they constantly talk about reading or praying by yourself, going to God by yourself, and trying to introspect for yourself what is truth, what is reality, and what is the how should I live my life. It does give guidelines for that, for sure, but they're guidelines of, like, you should go out into the wilderness. I mean, if we're told to live a life like Jesus, he went out into the to the wilderness for 40 days. Not a lot of people do that, and not a lot of people right then and there, like, that's that moment of introspection. 40 days by himself to introspect.
Right. And in that time too, he was put through suffering, which David Goggins also thinks is important.
Yeah, exactly.
He was put through temptations and trials that made him question his own beliefs and his own person.
Yeah.
And coming out of that, I would assume he had a better understanding of the reality of himself and what's around him.
Yeah. So what do you think? Like, do you think that if given time, like David Goggins, and if they suffered like him or similarly to him, they would come to the same conclusion?
I don't know, because I also think if you would have altered David Goggins' past at all, how would that would that have affected his future or his present self? And it makes me wonder if you would have changed, if you would have given him a father, that didn't abuse him, that was loving, would he have made the same life decisions that led him to where he is now, or would he just be working in an office somewhere?
Yeah, it's probably, I would say no.
Yeah.
I don't think, I think a lot of times, like, greatness comes from, bad beginnings, usually. Right. Or maybe that's just the underdog mentality. Like, those are the stories I always pay attention to, I should say.
Right.
Are the ones in which the dude comes from a destitute beginning, and then he is this awesome hero. I think those are the ones that a lot of people enjoy.
Yeah, that's not always the case though.
Yeah, of course not. It's not. Like, a lot of people come from great beginnings, or they've already had Donald Trump, like, millions of dollars. He just got a small loan.
And Iron Man,
exactly.
Was born into a billionaire family and became a Superman off being a billionaire. Batman too.
Exactly. So it's like it happens.
Two of the most popular superheroes too.
Ooh. See, maybe that's another indicator of humans wanting things they can't have, and suffering because of it. But no, I think I think his dad definitely played a huge role in driving him, because he even talked about it in the book a little bit about how I thought I had dealt with my past. I thought I had handled it, but in reality, I was running away from it.
He's always paying rent at that $7 a month apartment.
Exactly. And, like, a lot of people talk about that when they're famous musicians or something like that. They talk about, like, yeah, I was living in a van going from show to show, and that's what keeping being that dedicated, motivated, and no, not motivated, driven,
Yeah.
obsessed with that topic. That's what made them
Hmm.
successful. Having the vision of saying, I can do this, but not only having the vision, not only praying, but putting in the work
Yeah.
and grinding it out. That's what made it a reality.
And being able, and to a
And
lot of people,
yeah,
I think that was fun.
yeah,
Sitting here,
yes,
not sitting there in that situation,
yes,
which David Goggins talks about is a lot of times our our pull towards these, difficult
mm-hmm,
tasks,
mm-hmm,
these difficult goals that are going to put us in uncomfortable situations.
yes,
We're drawn to that in times of comfort.
yes,
When we're just sitting back in an air conditioned room,
mm-hmm,
reading about somebody climbing Mount Everest, we're
yeah,
like, oh man, or
I can,
watching a documentary about somebody climbing Mount Everest, we're like, that'd be sweet.
yeah,
I
yeah,
want to go do that. Let me
yeah,
let me grab the sleeping bag, call up the boys.
yeah, yeah,
But you get out there, you get at the base of the mountain and you realize you're gonna have to take a helicopter up and you're already cold
yeah,
and
yeah,
and you're like, well, maybe this isn't as great as I thought.
yeah, yeah.
You never take into account
The
when you're comfortable, you don't take into account what's hard. You don't take into
mhm.
account what's going to be uncomfortable about the situation. You just see the glory of it.
Exactly. You just see the glory of it.
Hmm.
Which I mean, I think that's that again is like we're programmed to be that way
Yeah.
biologically, I think, because if we didn't, when we were say before we had the ability to reason out that hey, maybe doing this really hard thing's actually good for me, before we
Uh-huh.
had that ability to reason, we simply had to do hard things. We simply just had to go for it. Um, and I think again, going back to what he with David Goggins, his ability to be able to say this is bad or this hurts, this sucks, but being able to reason it out and say, I see there where it's going to hurt me, but I also see the happiness at the end that I'm going to achieve.
Yes. He was definitely able to distinguish between the actions that would be pleasurable
Mm-hmm.
and the actions that may be very unpleasurable but
Mm-hmm.
ultimately beneficial.
Yes.
He was able to see the difference in those two things and decide to do the things that are going to be beneficial for him.
Yes. Oh, and going back to what I was talking about with the biology, like we're just not just, but like reasoning and logic are fairly new things,
Yeah.
and so like the ability for an animal to sit there and say, well, let me do this really hard thing, and it's just not there because it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Why expend excess calories and excess energy to do this thing that very well might kill me?
Hmm.
Animals aren't programmed to think that way,
Yeah.
and we originally weren't really programmed to think that way. We were thinking, how do we extend the life of this species,
Right.
or how do we protect my child, or how do I protect my wife?
How do we
How
exist?
do we exist? And now the stressor of existence is no longer there. The pressure of existence isn't there, and so that driving force that got us here to this point is no longer there, and we have to find our own drive, our own goal to
Hmm.
set a point to and to drive ourselves to it.
Yeah.
And in doing so, it's going to cause suffering, it's going to cause pain, but at the
Yeah.
end you're going to be at a better point than what you were before.
There is a lot of pushback, though, to people like David Goggins and the mindset, the lifestyle that he is living himself and, you know, teaching others about, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pushback to that. And it made me think about it. And one of the things that they mentioned in the book, or he might have said this on the podcast again, I can't remember, but he says that his refrigerator is never full. He's always looking for that next thing. He's
Yeah.
always looking for that next thing. And a lot of people say, well, when do you rest? How are you ever satisfied? Like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
If you're always, if you're always unsatisfied with where you're at and you're always looking for what's next, when's your time to just be happy? And it made me think that this is sort of contradictory to an analogy that Plato uses.
Mhm.
That's called his jar analogy. I believe if you look that up, you could find it.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, Plato says that there are two men. Each man has jars filled with precious foods and minerals and liquids and stuff like milk,
Yeah.
honey,
Mm-hmm.
diamond, whatever.
Yeah.
They each have their own set of jars, and they're all filled with these precious materials.
Yes.
One of the man's is all the jars are intact and they're just sitting there, and he can be content with what he has because he has it all there. The other man, his jars have holes in them. They're all leaking. So he is constantly in a battle to keep getting more of these rare materials, to keep filling his jars back up, and he never has time to sit there and just
Yeah.
enjoy the jars
I
and move past them, you know?
yeah. I think that's probably more of a testament to save, not spend, not a testament of don't be a, you know what I mean? Like the reason why there's holes in those jars is he's spending them. You know, it's like you have, a hole in your pocket, you're spending your money. You have a hole in that jar, you're eating too much food, you're
Yeah.
spending too much money, you're not
Well,
doing what needs to be
the
done.
context that Plato put this in was talking about appetites, and to not let your appetites rule your life for achievement, for physical.
So he's kind of I get
You
it
see what
now.
I'm saying?
That's like a demonic entity, like rage or like
Mhm.
lust. Don't let those things rule your world.
Right.
Be a complete human.
Yeah.
Don't be focused solely on drive and achievement that you abandon your friends and family.
Yeah.
I get that. Yeah, I do. And this is gonna make me sound like a douche probably, but like, who's to say we're supposed to be happy? I know I live a very happy life. I'm happy all the time. But like, who's to say we're supposed to be happy? Like,
A lot of people
I
say
get where
that.
David Goggins, but is it morally acceptable? Because there are plenty of people, millions of people, billions of people in this world that do not live like we live. They can't even have clean water, and they're struggling for food on a daily basis.
Uh-huh.
So are we supposed to be happy with the world we live in? No, because it's not good. It's not a good
Right.
world. It's a fallen world. It's a world that needs constant work, that needs constant achievement or
Mhm.
constant achievement to get better. It needs constant reiteration. It needs constant change, because change, death equals rebirth, and rebirth is change.
Right.
And David Goggins talks about that. It's like change is good. We change everything on a daily basis. We change the food we eat, change the clothes that we wear.
We change.
Yeah,
We're not
change.
the. I'm
We're
not the same person I
yeah.
was when I was, a kid. When I was 6 years old.
Yeah, exactly. Buddhism talks about how every second is a cycle of rebirth or death and
you're
rebirth.
You're a new person.
Millions of
There's
cells.
no true continuous self.
Yeah, I don't know how many years or days it takes for all the cells that you currently have to be completely replaced by new cells. But
It's a little bit over a decade, I
a
think.
little bit over a decade.
Yeah.
So a little bit over a decade, you don't have a single cell that you had a decade ago.
Well, there are some cells that stick around, like
that's
brain
fair.
cells.
That's fair.
Right.
That's definitely true. I don't. Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, I'm dumb. But the point is that like change is prevalent.
Yeah, the point's still there.
The point is there that that change is prevalent, and it may be one of the deepest and most profound truths of the world, of the reality of the universe, that it is constantly changing, that it is constantly evolving, and that we should constantly change and constantly evolve with it.
Yeah.
And should never be happy, because the world we currently live in is not a one.
Well, I think you can change and be happy.
Yeah. Well, perhaps change is happiness.
Uh-huh.
And that only are we really only happy when we are constantly challenging and changing ourselves? Because if you look at the Homo erectus, which is the first like human fossil to leave Africa, and live, its ranging years were like 1.6 million to almost the very beginning of modern humanity at 200,000.
Yeah, like
years
200,
ago.
400,000 years
200,
ago.
400,000 years ago. And it went from all the way out of mid-Africa to, some say and hypothesize, Indonesia and maybe even Australia. So to me, I mean, this is anthropomorphizing the heck out of history. But to me, that kind of speaks to human nature and the want to constantly see something new, and the want to constantly see something that is different and awe-inspiring and changing.
It could be explained by the warfare hypothesis, which we talked about this before.
Yeah, we did talk about that before. It could be the warfare hypothesis, that they're going from like you expand out of you overpopulate the current position that you're in, which then forces you to go to new lands and war with them to steal their lands or commandeer their lands.
Or it creates conflict in that initial environment because of the overpopulation. And there have been secting of different groups, creates conflict. One of the groups is forced out or leaves, and that results in migration. And they go somewhere and overpopulate there,
or cause conflict with the population already in there. Which constantly happens. It's just throughout history. Migration usually causes some sort of violence
Yeah.
somewhere.
But you
or
know what life
somehow.
is really?
What's that?
It's a war with yourself, just like David Goggins says. It's a long game and it's a mental game with yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, like the only one you're really fighting is yourself. Because if you're despairing before you even start something, you're never going to begin. You know,
Right.
if you're sitting there like I'm never going to get this paper done,
Yeah.
then why are you going to you're not even going to start that
And
paper.
how are you going to win a battle against yourself if you don't know yourself? Which is why
Oof.
the introspection is very important. Putting yourself in times where you can have a clear mind. When you run, don't listen to music.
Mm.
Think to
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah.
figure yourself out, get to
Yeah.
know yourself, because a lot of people don't.
Yeah. See, that's another. I don't like running without music, but I should start doing that
Mhm.
because here I am preaching about hard shit to do, and I'm like, oh, just listen to music when I run.
Yeah, just ignore it.
It's
Just block it out.
it's my fun thing to do. I like listening to music, and that's another thing. Like if he talks about in the book, like if you like running, maybe you should do weightlifting.
Yeah, do something
Or
else.
do something different. Like I like weightlifting with it, so maybe I should run. And
Definitely, yeah.
and so since I should start running, I should maybe not even do it with any music because that way I don't build a bad habit
Yeah.
of listening to music and running at the same time.
Definitely know how to take advantage of your strengths, but do not be discouraged to face your weaknesses.
Yeah, a lot of times I think you should use your strengths in concert with your weaknesses.
Uh-huh.
So like, if your weakness is getting up early, but your strength is making coffee or
Yeah.
something like you just love making coffee,
Mhm.
but you hate getting up early. So the first thing you should do, make that cup of coffee. Like if you're used to getting up at 10 and you just love taking your time making that coffee, get up at 6 or 7 or 8 and then make that cup of coffee as long as you want to take it.
Yeah,
And just
or
think of
4:30 and run to work.
or run to like David Goggins in 4 hoodies. It's really just about figuring out what works out best
Yeah.
for you, and that's the whole point
Yeah.
of it's an individual war with
Mhm.
yourself.
And talking about schedule, though, another big takeaway for me was that he says you have to win your mornings. He
Yes.
says you have to win your mornings, but taking that further is that he talks about, and this was one of the challenges at one of the end of the chapters. He talks about how you need to every day should be a 24-hour mission, and each hour, each half-hour segment should be wholly dedicated to a task.
Yes. Mhm.
When you wake up, you have a block for making breakfast and eating and taking a shower,
Yeah.
getting ready, whatever.
Yeah.
You have a block for working out. You have a block for then like work, your career, job, school, whatever it may be. At the end of the day, you have a block for your family. You have a block for your personal
Yeah.
hobbies and aspirations. But make sure that everything each time is dedicated to one thing so that you're not trying to multitask and end up getting nothing done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you know that, okay, for this next 2.5 hours, I'm going to be doing this thing.
Yeah.
And so you're not checking your phone. You're not doing other things during that time because it's for that thing.
Exactly.
And I feel like that it might turn into a tedious lifestyle,
Yeah.
but it's definitely an effective way to be productive.
And and that's the thing. Like, I was thinking as you're talking, like maybe perhaps lifestyle is not for everybody.
Yeah.
Because not everyone wants to live that way of keeping on a schedule 24/7.
Uh-huh.
And I get that.
And some people shouldn't, like artists. Those people I'm sure would not work. Their work would not have the quality it does if they were forced to work a schedule like that.
Instinctively creative people put inside a box probably are not going to create the best things.
Yeah.
So, and I would agree with that. And I think being aware of that is a good thing because not everyone fits. You can't fit a square into a round hole every time. So it definitely work. If you're trying to be ultra productive and you got a goal, like if you're in college and you got the mindset and you're just trying to figure out how to apply it and how to get to the end game,
then that's a good strategy.
That's a great strategy because it works out perfectly. You can set the goal, and the main thing is about setting a goal is you're not going to do it if you're not disciplined, and you're not going to have discipline if you don't have a reason. And so, setting all these blocks up is perfect. But like you're saying, a super creative person doesn't have a reason to have these blocks.
Yeah,
it actually
you got to get something out of it.
It's detriment, It's detriment to how they are instinctively.
Right.
And so if you're an instinctive person who instinctively wants to get stuff done and you feel bad when you don't, because there are people like that.
Yeah, and sometimes that does coincide with the creative, because John Steinbeck thought that, you know, you should tackle. He was obviously a fantastic author.
Yeah.
But he thought that the way he tackled his writing was that he did it like a job. Like he would work consistently
Yeah.
every day for the time he would normally be working a job, you know, if he had a different career. And
That's what Joe Rogan does, like for his stand-ups and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like when he writes for an hour a day. I think that's what he says. But like a lot of people like that, like Jocko Willink. These are people who are ultra disciplined.
Right.
And I'm not saying like, this is a good question. Is discipline, is that something you can cultivate, or is that something that comes from without or from within? Right?
I definitely think it's something that you cultivate.
Absolutely.
I don't think many people just have a rigidly disciplined nature.
Absolutely.
Some
So-
people might, but I do think it's something you cultivate.
And so the way you cultivate it is how? Like how would you cultivate self-discipline?
Right, by forcing yourself to do those things, forcing yourself to follow a disciplined lifestyle. You know,
That
one strategy being compartmentalizing your day
Yeah.
and making sure that you're doing this thing when you have it scheduled.
Yeah. And also I think I agree with that. I think what helps following the schedule more is taking back and looking at, well, why am I making the schedule?
Uh-huh.
Why do I want to be productive? Why do I want to be successful?
Yeah.
And then once you answer that question, it makes answering, or it makes that 1 second decision, like David Goggins talks about,
Yeah.
much easier to answer. It's like if you already have the reason as to why I'm getting up so early
Yeah.
and why I'm following this schedule, and you already have that preloaded, you can say I'm doing it for my family, I'm doing it for my
Yeah.
parents, whatever the situation
When you're in that
may
position and you're tired and you want to stop doing whatever you're doing, and
Mhm.
you ask yourself, why am I doing this? I could be doing something else. Why am I following this stupid schedule?
be. Yeah,
Then you're able to say, this is why, and keep on going.
exactly. And I think that's crucial. That's something I struggle with immensely. Like
Yeah.
I will make a schedule and then I'll be like, alrighty, I'm not doing that because
Yeah, meditate to do your homework and then not do your homework because you meditated.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like I need 15 minutes to clear my mind, and then 30 minutes later I'm playing The Witcher. I'm like, I'm clearing my mind, all right?
This is part of the process.
It's called procrastination.
Yeah, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. And that's
it's a part of the process for creative people sometimes.
yeah, it can be. But that's one of the things that can sneak in to answer that question for you, is if that question pops up and you don't have the correctly prepared answer for it to fire back and move against it, then something else like procrastination might slip in and answer it for you.
Yes,
with an answer that isn't going to be beneficial for you in the end.
absolutely. And that's another key thing to kind of take a look at, is beneficial for you in the end.
Right.
And I go again, it's an individual basis. It's like David Goggins, perhaps he was owned by the drive to constantly
Still
want.
is, seems like.
It still is, but maybe that's what brings him enjoyment,
Yeah.
is being better than people and winning.
One thing that definitely sort of sells his lifestyle is what he was talking about in the last chapter, when he's saying that he starts it off. He's like, I don't know if you believe in God. I don't care really, but I'm big in visualization, and this is something I imagine.
Yes.
That when I die, I'm going to be in heaven and I'm going to be waiting in this line, and God's at the end of it and he's checking everybody out. He's interviewing them as they go along.
Yeah.
And I get up there and God has this list that has a bulleted list of all the things that I was supposed to be and accomplish on earth. This is all the stuff that I was meant to do. And I don't want to go up there and see this list and be like, "What? Where'd you get that stuff from, God? That's not me."
Yeah.
And God be like, "This was what you were supposed to do. You know, you messed up."
I think that's an interesting take on free will too. I didn't mean to interrupt, but go ahead.
Oh, you're fine.
Yeah.
But then he says, "I want to be the guy that goes up there," and God's looking at the list of things I was supposed to do, and then looking at what my life was, and saying, "Oh, you did this too, and that, and this wasn't on my list, but you still did it.
Yeah.
Wow, Goggins, that's wow,
impressive.
yeah.
Yeah,
You know, and thinking about it like that, to think that a human can, because this is where David Goggins seems to be going with this, is that a human has the ability actually
To surprise God.
to impress God. You know,
Yeah, and I think I mean, shoot. I mean, that might be in the scripture. It's just being viewed as differently. I mean, like it talks
Yeah.
about how we're made in his image and then how we're given the same ability as him to articulate and being able to say what we're able to say
Uh-huh.
and to set a goal and to achieve that goal. And then he's just taking it a step further and saying that we're made, the way I kind of took it is like we're made so much so in his image, in the Lord's image, that we are very capable of surprising God in a sense that like achieving so much or doing so much that like it it doesn't seem humanly possible.
Right.
It doesn't seem within the realms of reason or logic or
Right.
even like how could a human being have that many achievements or do what he's doing in this moment. And I think it, like it's by no means trying to take away the extravagance of God because I
Mhm.
think he taught like he's very reverent. It seems like, and I don't think he's in saying that you can surprise God. I don't think he's trying to take away from the power
I
of
think it
him.
is just a good
It's just a
visualization.
visualization of him, like yeah, just trying to be the best version of himself.
Right. And David Goggins does seem to be a person that has achieved things that do not seem humanly possible, you know, that seem to be above
Mhm.
human.
It's because he
Um,
said it. And he said, "I'm going to do it. I'm going to set the goal," and he achieved it.
yeah, but I hope what people can take away from his story, you know, is not solely that he accomplished these things, is not looking at like how we started this, is not
Mhm.
looking at his accomplishments within isolation,
Yeah.
but seeing where he came from, seeing how he was able to accomplish those things that he
Yeah.
did, and realizing that most other people can too. You know,
Yeah.
maybe not most other people can do the things that he did, but most other people can do a lot more than what they think they can and what they are currently doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, not everyone could be an NBA basketball player, but a lot of people can do a lot more than what they're
More than
thinking.
they're doing. Yeah.
100%. And I think, and getting back to the what if question, is like, that's like that's a moral question at that point. Because
Yeah.
it is,
Do you have a responsibility to reach your potential?
exactly. I would argue yes.
Hmm.
I think that you do, because otherwise you don't live a fulfilled life. And if you don't live the thing is like if you don't reach that full potential, you're not living a fulfilled life, and you're going to feel that inside yourself, and you're
Yeah.
not going to be as happy. You're going to be depressed, and you're going
You
to
would
live.
think.
That's the way I
I would
think.
think, yeah.
That's the way I think. That's why I don't feel satisfied when I don't live up to the potential I've set for
Mhm.
myself.
Well, keep in mind, do you have anything else to add or are you ready to end?
No, I think that's it. Yeah, I can't. Yeah.
Keep in mind that you can do a lot more than what you are doing now. And think about what the cost.
It's all incremental. That's one big thing. It's all about incremental change, not
Oh, or
doing
not drastic.
yeah, like
Right.
you can do drastic change, but just be prepared for the consequences that come along with drastic changes. Like if you're
Yeah.
dropping 100 pounds in 3 months, like your body might fight back at
Yeah.
you a little bit. But the thing is if you set that goal for yourself, achieve the goal and stay driven on the goal. Otherwise, you're not in
Just
full
like
control.
watching the documentary and thinking about climbing the mountain, you're not going to go from sitting on your couch to on top of the mountain. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of
In
steps
between,
that take place
yeah.
to get you there. You have to
Exactly.
go out, you have to find out what gear you need, you
Yeah.
have to go buy it,
Mhm.
you have to learn how to use it, you
Yeah.
have to train your body physically
Yeah.
to endure those conditions,
Exactly.
you have to actually go out there and do the hike,
Uh-huh.
you got to play, yeah.
Yeah, it's
There's
a
a
lot
lot
more
of stuff that gets you to that end goal.
exactly, and he talks about that in the book a lot. Just
Mhm.
it's a lot of, and he talks about also how his path was maybe not the safest path, and how his body kind of paid the price for it. And so he kind of is like, just increase your potential 5% every week,
Right.
and you'll get there,
Uh-huh.
or 1% every week. It's better than nothing. Incremental change is
Incremental
exponential.
improvement is still improvement.
Yeah, exactly. Incremental improvement is still improvement, and it's exponential. A tenth of a percent better in every day for 1 year. You're 365 tenths of a percent better. I don't know how
That's
that
true.
works in percentages.
30% better.
30% better. We'll say that. Yeah, you're
Just
30
about.
just about 30% better in 1 year, and then at that point, 2 years of getting 0.1%
You're
better every
60%
day. You're
better.
60% better,
And eventually, in a couple of years, you'll reach 100% and die because 100% is.
that's how that works. Once you're 100%, you're dead.
Yep.
I heard a story one time. This is just I'll end it at this. A funny little this person was like, yeah, I've had like 5 beers that are like 5%, and so that's 25%. And then I had like 3 shots, so I'm like at 100%. I'm like fully drunk. I'm 100%
That's how it
drunk.
adds up. I'm at my limit.
I'm at my limit. I'm at 100% drunk, and I was like, well, what if you take a shot right now and you go over it? And then it
Can't do
destroyed their
it.
world. Like destroyed them. They're like, I'm done. I thought that was
That's
pretty
funny.
funny.
Well, think about what the cost is to the world with you and everybody else not achieving their full potential. I'm
Leave it
Seth
down in the
Harper.
comments. Let us know what you
Yeah.
think. If you, I'm sorry. If you, I would be
I was
interested.
ready to sign off.
I was ready to sign off too. Yeah, leave it down in the comments though.
What are
like,
you going to
what
be
do you
interested
think?
in, though?
I would be interested to see what people think.
Oh,
Like
okay.
if it's a moral question.
Yeah, go check out the audiobook too, because it
yeah.
was when you first told me about it, when you were like, this is what I want to do this next episode on.
Yeah.
I thought, motivational book. That's not really my thing. I'm not big in on that.
Yeah.
But it impressed me.
Our friend Yasmin was the one who volunteered it. She was like, you should read this book for the podcast. I was like, all right.
Oh, really? She suggested it to you?
Yeah. She
Oh, well, thank you,
suggested it to me.
Yasmin, for the suggestion to Harrison. Because
solid suggestion. Changed.
I didn't realize she read that.
No. I don't. Yeah, I think she read it. She was
cool.
like, you should read this for the podcast. I was like, cool.
Well, yeah, like I said, not big on motivational stuff, but this really impressed me. So go check out the book. It's called Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins.
Yep.
The Audible audiobook is what we listen to.
I recommend. Yeah.
Recommend that. Yeah, but
Because
you
he
can get the
definitely
physical
leaves.
book as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And watch some of his podcasts if you don't want to read the whole book. It's very the gist of what he's talking about, the driving force behind the book.
It's in a lot of his stuff.
A lot of his stuff, a lot of his podcasts and things like that.
I think the book is just the
it's the path to follow.
Yeah,
kind of like a guide.
It's very in tuned as well. It's very nicely constructed.
Yes, absolutely, and it gives you plenty of information to draw from and examples to be like, oh shit, if he's doing this, I can do what I'm doing. If he's running on broken legs, I can run another mile. It helped me a lot with that. Where it was like, I went hiking this past week. It was like, oh, dude, I do not want to hike up this freaking mountain. I've had Goggins in my head, like, do it, motherfucker, do it. I'm like, all right, let's do it.
That's been me running recently.
Yeah, right. And just listening to him kind of is a good little thing to have in your head because he's such a crazy guy. You're just like, he's a human though. So
yeah, thinking about okay, David Goggins did this. David Goggins ran 100 miles with no training. This I can do whatever it is in front of me right now.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I've taken away from the book. It's like
one thing I would like to mention though is at the end he talks about he was having all those issues and he thought he was going to die.
Yeah.
From not stretching.
Yeah, the psoas.
Who doesn't stretch? If you're running,
right?
if you're running ultra marathon, stretch. But you're not a runner. Yeah, right. Stretching is like running 101.
It is.
Like it's like if you're gonna run, you're gonna stretch.
Well, that was when he was in power. Like Oh yeah, that's actually right.
He had done
a bunch of ultras.
He had done a bunch of ultras.
Yeah. That's what's really crazy is that the
stretching.
psoas is so important to your life. Like a muscle, can end you. Like he was literally dying because his psoas was so tight.
Yeah,
that the muscle connecting the spine.
When
to
he
the
said
lower
he
legs,
said he was like I'm like a 6'1", 6'2" guy, but my muscles were like 5'10".
Yeah, because they're just so compact, like,
so tight.
What? Like how is that affecting the joints? Like I bet his spine got fused.
That's what he had, that big knot on the back of his neck, you know?
Yeah. And he had knots on his the front. He was literally getting compressed.
Yeah.
It's crazy. He said he looked in the mirror, he dropped like 2 inches. He was like at 6'2" and he dropped to 6 foot or something like that. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Nonsense.
Go learn about
David Goggins. Great guy. I really enjoyed the book and I really enjoy a lot of his work.
It gets a recommendation from us. We're the Basement Boys, aka the Alex Haroms, aka formal group, aka
formal group, aka
Brady's Boys,
aka
Brady Bunch.
Ooh, the Brady Bunch.
Yeah,
I like Basement Boys too. But yeah, check it out.
This has been us.
Harrison and Seth. Peace. That was good.